Under the cloak of night, Anna moved like a shadow through the towering corridors of the big house, her breath shallow and her senses heightened. The estate was silent except for the distant hum of crickets and the faint flicker of lanterns casting, shifting silhouettes on the weathered walls. Tonight, she was more than just a slave. She was a ghost of retribution, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and fierce resolve. She clutched a small bundle of homemade incendiary devices, crafted from bits of broken glass, oil-soaked rags, and the stubborn ingenuity born from years of watching and learning. Her eyes flicked toward the towering wine cellar door, which she knew would serve as the keystone of her destructive plan. As she crept past the guards, who were stumbling drunkenly after the master's lavish feast, she remembered Mara's quiet warning. "Tonight, you must be swift. The house is as fragile as our hopes." Anna's fingers trembled slightly, but her mind was clear. She had rehearsed every step in the dark corners of her mind, every escape route mapped out with meticulous care. She paused before slipping into the shadows behind the servants' quarters, where a careless guard's laughter echoed faintly. With a deep breath, she pushed open a door just wide enough to slip inside, her senses alert for the slightest sound. Inside, the scent of old wood and spilled wine filled her nostrils. She moved swiftly, her eyes scanning for the oil barrels and flammable materials she had secretly collected over weeks, hidden beneath loose planks and behind a false wall. "Tonight, I burn this nightmare down," Anna whispered softly, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hope. Every step she took was a silent prayer for justice, every movement driven by the ghosts of her mother's screams and the countless injustices etched into her soul. As she set the device against the aged wood near the wine cellar, her fingers brushed against a parchment hidden beneath a loose brick, revealing a list of names, the master's secret, their sins laid bare. Her heart clenched as she realized. Her act would ignite not only flames but a long-awaited reckoning. As she stepped back into the shadows, the first sparks of flame flickered to life, illuminating her determined face. The house shuddered as fire consumed it, a roaring, unstoppable force of vengeance. Anna watched from a distance, her body tense with anticipation, knowing that tonight her pain and fury would be etched into the very bones of the estate. An indelible mark of justice born from darkness. As the flames erupted with a deafening roar, casting wild shadows that danced like specters across the crumbling walls, Anna's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest as if trying to escape. The chaos she herself had unleashed. In the thick, choking smoke, she moved swiftly and silently, clutching a small bundle, her only remaining proof of her plan, close to her battered frame. Every crackle and pop of the fire seemed to echo her own tumult, a furious symphony of vengeance and despair. From her vantage point behind a broken doorway, she watched the house ignite with an almost divine fury, the windows shattering into jagged explosions of glass that rained down like shards of her shattered past. The screams of the masters echoed. Amid the chaos, some in panic, others in drunken bravado, but all drowned beneath the inferno consuming their decadent sanctuary. Anna's eyes flickered with a mixture of triumph and terror. "Tonight, you all burn," she whispered hoarsely, voice trembling but resolute. Her skin prickled with heat as the smoke thickened, stinging her lungs and blurring her vision. Yet she refused to look away. This was her moment of reckoning. She darted through the chaos, shadows trailing behind her, heart aching with the weight of every cruel deed she had endured and witnessed. The fire's glow painted her face in a hellish light, revealing a fierce resolve that no chain could shatter. As she slipped into the night, her ears still caught the distant shouts and the collapsing walls, a symphony of destruction that marked the end of an era. "Let the world remember this night," she murmured, voice almost lost in the roaring inferno, knowing deep down that her vengeance was only the beginning of something greater, an awakening that would ripple far beyond the burning walls of the house, setting fire to the very foundations of the wicked system she despised. As the flames roared higher, casting flickering shadows across the charred remains of the house, Anna moved swiftly through the chaos, her senses sharpened by a mixture of adrenaline and grief. Her lungs burned from the smoke, tears stung her eyes, not from fear but from the weight of every injustice she had endured, every soul lost beneath the master's cruelty. She paused briefly behind a collapsing pillar, heart pounding so loudly she feared it might betray her presence. Out of the smoky darkness, the overseer's voice boomed, drunken and slurred. "Stop her! She's setting fire to our legacy!" Anna clenched her fists, trembling but unyielding. Her mind flashed vivid memories, the brutal lashes on her mother's back, the screams of broken spirits, the countless nights locked in darkness, dreaming of freedom. "Tonight, I burn the lie they built," she whispered fiercely, voice hoarse but resolute. Carefully, she reached into her worn satchel, fingertips trembling as they grasped the makeshift device she had crafted, a blend of oil-soaked cloth and fire-starting herbs she'd gathered in secret, knowing this act would mark her forever. She glanced back at Mara's son, trapped beneath a fallen beam, desperate to help, but knowing she couldn't risk more lives. "Hold on," she muttered under her breath, voice thick with emotion. With a final breath, she ignited the fuse, a tiny spark that ignited the incendiary, then darted away into the night, lungs heaving, heart ablaze with vengeance. Flames erupted behind her, the house shuddering violently as the timber groaned and cracked, consuming everything in its path. Somewhere within the inferno, she heard the sharp cry of a falling wall, the screams of masters scrambling for escape, but Anna's focus was fixed ahead. She knew this was only the beginning, a symbolic destruction that would shake the very foundations of their brutal system, and as she slipped into the shadows, a fierce hope ignited within her. Perhaps this night would spark the fire of rebellion, a spark that could ignite a new dawn. The flames roared like a furious beast unleashed, devouring the ancient timber with a relentless hunger as Anna darted across the scorched courtyard, her breath ragged and heart pounding like a tribal drum echoing in her ears. Shadows flickered wildly, cast by the inferno that painted the night. Sky in ominous red and orange hues, transforming the estate into a living nightmare. She could hear the panicked shouts of masters, their voices muffled by crackling wood and falling debris, their desperate scramble for escape echoing through the chaos. "Get out! Someone help! Fire! The house is burning!" one of them screamed, voice trembling with fear and fury. Anna's eyes darted toward Mara's son, trapped beneath a fallen beam, the boy's small face streaked with soot, eyes wide with terror. She clutched her chest, fighting to steady her trembling hands, knowing any hesitation could cost him his life. "Hold on! I'm coming!" she called out, voice strained but filled with fierce determination. The smoke billowed thick and choking, clawing at her lungs as she sprinted toward the wreckage, her mind racing through her clandestine plans. How to save the boy, how to ensure her act of vengeance would leave a lasting scar on their corrupt hierarchy. Then she saw him, trembling. Under the heavy wood, and without thinking, she leapt forward, grabbing the boy's hand just as the beam shifted ominously. "Don't move! Hold tight!" she commanded, voice barely audible over the crackling destruction. Together they scrambled backward, sparks flying past their heads, the heat intense enough to singe her skin. Behind her, the house shuddered violently, a deafening groan as walls buckled and timbers collapsed, sealing their fate as part of the raging inferno. Anna's mind flashed with memories, her mother's screams, her own suffering, and now this act of defiance, each moment fueling her resolve. As they escaped into the night, she cast one last glance at the blazing ruin, knowing this was more than destruction. It was a symbol of uprising, a torch ignited in the darkness to awaken the oppressed. Her voice cracked as she whispered fiercely to Mara's son, "We'll carry this fire inside us forever," feeling the weight of both her pain and hope intertwine. As they vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a house consumed by flames and a story that would echo through generations. The flames roared defiantly behind Anna as she sprinted through the scorched shadows of the estate, her lungs burning. With every hurried breath, the house was a cauldron of chaos. Walls crackled and collapsed, sending plumes of black smoke curling into the night sky like sinister ribbons weaving through the stars. She clutched Mara's son close, his small frame trembling against her. Sweat-slicked body, both of them desperate to escape the inferno's grip. Behind her, shouts and screams echoed, masters and overseers frantic, their voices drowned in the deafening crackle of the fire. Anna's heart hammered in her chest, a tumult of adrenaline and grief, yet her mind was sharp, calculating. She darted past burning beams, the heat licking her skin as she dodged debris falling like deadly rain. In her ear, Mara's voice trembled. "Anna, wait. What if... What if—" But Anna cut her off with a fierce whisper. "No, turning back now. We've burned their lies, their cruelty. This fire is our rebirth." She glimpsed the twisted form of a fallen chandelier, the glow of flames reflecting in her dark eyes. Eyes that had witnessed unthinkable suffering and now blazed with purpose. Her steps carried her toward the forest's edge, the cool dark. Waiting just beyond the blaze, offering refuge and silence. Every muscle ached, her body slick with sweat and ash, yet her spirit soared with a wild hope, an unbreakable vow to never let their tyranny extinguish her. As she pushed forward, she whispered a silent promise. "This night, I burn the past to forge a future." Her voice was a gritty prayer as she vanished into the shadows, leaving the house to crumble in flames, a blazing monument to her fury and resilience. In the dying glow of the inferno, Anna's breath ragged and trembling, she slipped through, the smoldering ruins, shadows clinging to her like a second skin. The house was a collapsing skeleton of twisted timber and blazing debris. Flames clawed the night sky, casting flickering silhouettes across her face, highlighting her dirt-streaked skin and fierce, determined eyes. Nearby, the screams of the masters echoed, some in frantic panic, others in despair. But Anna's heart hammered with a complex web of satisfaction and dread. She knew her deed had severed their hold, yet the heavy weight of what she'd unleashed pressed down on her conscience. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she saw a figure stumbling, a tall, broad-shouldered man, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead, clutching a burning torch that threatened to ignite the remnants of the house further. It was the estate's cruel overseer, a man whose greed had driven many to suffering. Now, he looked at her with a mixture of rage and fear. "You'll burn us all, girl," he spat, voice hoarse and trembling. Anna stepped closer, her voice steady but low. "No, I'm freeing us from your chains. This is justice, not chaos. Your reign ends tonight." She watched as the flames consumed the last of the structure, the heat pressing against her face, sweat mixing with tears she refused to shed. Her fingers clenched around a ragged piece of cloth soaked in oil, her homemade weapon of destruction, feeling the weight of her purpose. In that moment, she realized her revenge was no longer just a spark. It's a wildfire, unpredictable and unstoppable. As the blaze roared, she turned toward the dark forest, her heart pounding with both relief and uncertainty. Every step she took was a defiance of the past, a vow to forge a future unshackled from cruelty. Her voice, barely a whisper, echoed into the night. "This is only the beginning." With each stride, she left behind the ashes of oppression, carrying with her the fierce hope that her sacrifice might ignite a revolution. As the roaring flames swallowed the once imposing structure, Anna stood amidst the chaos, her chest heaving with a mix of exhaustion and fierce triumph. The fire cast dancing shadows across her face, illuminating her piercing eyes, filled with both pain and unyielding resolve. Behind her, the tangled smoke billowed upward, choking the night air and muffling the distant screams of the masters, desperately fleeing. She clenched her fists, hearing the crackle of burning wood and the shattering of glass as the house succumbed to her vengeance. Her mind replayed the brutal memories, the whips, the screams, her mother's lifeless eyes, each fueling her determination. Suddenly a figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, gaunt man clutching a burning torch, eyes wild with panic. "You'll burn us all alive, you monster!" he snarled, voice trembling with rage and fear. Anna stepped forward, voice calm, yet icy. "I am freeing us from your chains. You think this is chaos, but it's justice. You built this house on blood, on suffering. Today I burn away your legacy. This is the end of your reign." She watched as the man's face twisted in fury, then desperation, as the flames snapped and spat around him. Without hesitation, she turned and sprinted toward the shadowed woods, every step driven by her past trauma and her unbreakable will. Her breath ragged, she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." Her voice barely audible over the roar of destruction. The heat of the fire brushed against her skin, but her soul felt lighter, unburdened. She had unleashed the wildfire of her vengeance, and with each fleeing step, she vowed to forge a future where no one would endure the cruelties she had known. The night was still thick with smoke and promise, leaving behind ashes that symbolized both the end of her torment and the dawn of her rebellion. As Anna melted into the dense shadows of the forest, her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat echoing the tumult of her soul. The flames behind her roared fiercely, devouring the mansion that had symbolized her pain and oppression for so many years, but her mind was elsewhere, focused, relentless. She clutched a small cloth bundle containing remnants of her past. Worn photograph of her mother's face, a broken piece of the house's window, a charred scrap of her own childhood. The night air was thick with smoke, the scent of burnt wood pungent and sharp, blending with the coppery tang of spilled blood and charred memories. Her breath came ragged as she pushed through the undergrowth, her senses heightened, every snapping branch, every whisper of wind like a signal that danger lurked nearby. She knew the estate's guards would soon give chase, their shouts echoing faintly in the distance, but she refused to stop. Her purpose was clear, her resolve unbreakable. An image flashed, her mother's trembling face, the tears in her eyes. As she was dragged away, fueling Anna's fury and determination. "I won't let it end like this," she whispered fiercely, voice trembling with a mixture of grief and hope. The moonlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating her path like a guiding spirit as she slipped into a hidden hollow, a temporary refuge where she could breathe, plot, and gather her strength. Her fingers traced the scar beneath her collar, a reminder of her trauma, a constant ache that now transformed into a burning resolve for justice. Each step away from the inferno was a step toward liberation, yet the past clung to her like a shadow, dark and persistent. She knew her vengeance was only the beginning, a seed that would grow into a movement that challenged the entire system of cruelty. Her eyes darkened, resolute. "They thought I was broken, that I'd never rise," she murmured, clutching her small tokens of defiance. "Tonight, I have set fire not just to a house, but to their tyranny, and no matter where I go, I carry the flame within me, something they can never extinguish." As dawn threatened to break, Anna pressed forward, her silhouette a faint ember flickering against the vast, oppressive night, carrying the weight of her trauma, her hopes, and her vow to overthrow the chains that had bound her in darkness for too long. As the first light of dawn seeped timidly through the jagged cracks of the smoldering ruins, Anna moved like a shadow, clutching the remnants of her battered resolve. Her breath ragged, she paused amidst the twisted metal and splintered wood, shadows dancing around her in the early morning haze. The acrid scent of smoke clung to her skin as she knelt beside a fallen torch, her carefully crafted incendiary device, half buried beneath charred debris, still warm from its tragic purpose. Her fingertips trembled as they brushed against the rough cloth pouch where she'd hidden her last supplies, her mind replaying the chaos. Screams, flames licking greedily at the night sky, the collapsing walls engulfing the sins of those inside. A voice echoed in her memory, a cruel taunt from one of the masters. "You're nothing but a shadow, girl. You'll burn out like a flicker in the dark." She clenched her fists, eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and icy determination. "Not this time," she whispered, voice raw but resolute. Then, slowly, she straightened, her scarred face illuminated by the flickering remnants of the fire's glow, and stepped into the waking world. Behind her, the house groaned and shattered, surrendering to the inferno's relentless hunger, a monument to centuries of cruelty reduced to ash and ghostly memories. Yet Anna knew her act of destruction was only the spark. Her true vengeance lay in the ripple of chaos it would unleash, the awakening of those still cowering beneath oppressive shadows. She moved forward, silent and unseen, leaving behind the smoldering skeleton of a house that once held their sins, her heart pounding with the ache of loss and the fierce hope of a future where justice might finally emerge from the ashes. As the last flames flickered and crumbled into a smoky haze, Anna lingered in the shadows, her chest heaving with a mix of exhaustion and bitter triumph. The roaring fire had devoured the house, transforming the grand, oppressive mansion into smoldering ruins, a searing testament to her resolve. Around her, chaos reigned. Screams echoed through broken windows, the cracking of timber punctuated by the frantic shouts of masters desperately trying to escape. She melted into the darkness, clutching the makeshift torch that had ignited their downfall, her eyes ablaze with a fierce, unyielding light. Suddenly, a voice cut through the turmoil, a rasping, desperate plea from a trembling master trying to negotiate his life. Anna's heart clenched, but her face remained stoic. "You thought you'd silence us with fear, with brutality," she whispered, voice trembling with restrained fury. "Tonight, your silence ends." Her hand tightened around the torch as she stepped forward into the chaos, her every movement deliberate, her mind already calculating the next move. Behind her, the house groaned as the walls collapsed inward, a deafening cacophony of destruction. She knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about breaking the chains of systemic cruelty, about delivering a message that no amount of wealth or power could shield them from justice. Her steps were silent but resolute, moving past the burning wreckage, eyes scanning for her next target, an overseer trying to hide in the shadows, trembling as he clutched his medal of authority. Anna's voice was cold, piercing the night. "Your reign of terror is over." She reached into her pocket, clutching a small vial of oil and a rag she'd hidden earlier, symbols of her calculated plan for a final act, an act that would mark the beginning of something greater than revenge. As the fires blazed higher, casting long, flickering shadows across her face, Anna felt an overwhelming surge of defiance. She was no longer just a slave seeking vengeance. She was a harbinger of upheaval, a spark ignited in the darkness to illuminate the path toward liberation. Her heart hammered with the weight of her scars, her memories, and the hope that her actions, brutal yet necessary, would ripple outward, challenging the oppressive silence that had endured for generations, awakening something long buried beneath the ashes. Under the suffocating cloak of darkness, Anna moved with calculated precision through the shadowed corridors of the crumbling estate, her breath shallow yet steady. The fire had already begun to consume the grand house, tongues of orange and crimson licking at the ancient wood, casting flickering specters against the stone walls. She clutched the vial of oil tightly, feeling its cool weight against her palm. Her heart pounded fiercely, part adrenaline, part catharsis, as she navigated past the toppled furniture and scattering debris, every step echoing her silent vow of justice. Ahead, she spotted the overseer, a trembling, gaunt figure clutching a rusty sword, trying to hide behind a charred pillar. His eyes widened with terror when he saw her, recognition mixed with dread. "You think you can escape?" Anna's voice cut through the chaos, stark and unwavering. She raised her hand, revealing the rag soaked in oil, dripping with promise. "Tonight your reign ends. This house will burn not just for the shame you've heaped upon us, but for the blood that stains its walls." Without hesitation, she splashed the oil across the wooden beams near the stairwell, her movements swift and deliberate, every gesture infused with years of suppressed rage. Flames flickered alive at her command, sparked by her match, her final act of defiance. The overseer screamed, stumbling back as smoke thickened, blackening the once luminous ceiling. Anna stepped away, watching the inferno grow, her face illuminated by the fiery glow. The house shuddered, collapsing inward, a roaring testament to her deliberate destruction. As she retreated into the night, her ears caught the distant shouts and chaos, the crackle of flames and the screams of the masters trapped inside. She felt the weight of her trauma lifting, replaced by a fierce sense of liberation. "This isn't just revenge," she whispered to herself, voice trembling, yet resolute. "It's the dawn of something new." With every fiery plume that soared skyward, Anna knew her act would ripple beyond the ashes, igniting the spirit of rebellion in those still oppressed, sparking an unstoppable movement that would challenge the very foundations of their brutal system. As the flames consumed the once imposing walls of the big house, Anna's breath caught in her throat, the acrid scent of smoke curling into her nostrils while the night sky erupted in a fiery blaze that painted everything in shades of orange and crimson. She watched from a safe distance, her heart pounding, yet oddly serene, each crackle and roar a symphony of justice long overdue. Behind her, the distant shouts of terrified masters echoed through the darkness, their voices drowned by the inferno that now devoured their opulence. She clenched her fists as memories surged, her mother's screams, the lash of her master's whip, the cold emptiness of her childhood. "This is for you," she whispered, voice trembling yet fierce, as tears blurred her vision. Her eyes flicked to Mara's young son, trapped amidst the chaos, and without hesitation, Anna darted forward through collapsing beams and swirling smoke, her body aching but driven by a primal need to save what little innocence remained. She reached him just as flames licked dangerously close and grabbed his trembling hand, pulling him clear. "Run now!" she commanded, voice cracked but unwavering. Her feet pounded the scorched earth as she led him away from the inferno, shadows dancing around her like ghosts of her past. Behind her, the house shuddered violently, collapsing inward with a deafening roar that echoed her own internal upheaval. She knew this act of destruction was not merely revenge, but a declaration that the oppressive cycle of cruelty, silence, and suffering would no longer hold sway. Her body ached with exhaustion, yet a fierce light burned within her, illuminating her path forward into an uncertain future. As she vanished into the night, she cast one last glance at the smoldering ruins, knowing that her vengeance had sown the seeds of rebellion. The fire had become a symbol of pain transformed into power, of trauma turned into action, of a broken system finally succumbing to the fury of those who refused to be silenced any longer. In the suffocating darkness, Anna's resolve hardened. As she slipped out of the shadows, her breath ragged but steady. The house's inferno still roared behind her, flames licking the sky, casting flickering shadows over her trembling figure. She clutched a ragged cloth soaked in oil, her hands, trembling with a mix of fear and fiery determination. As she navigated through the debris-strewn grounds, she heard the distant screams of masters and enslaved alike, their chaos fueling her adrenaline. Pausing behind a broken pillar, she whispered fiercely to herself, "This ends tonight." Her eyes flicked toward the burning silhouette of the house, now a twisted monument of her pain and her power. Suddenly, a voice barked behind her, an overseer, voice thick with panic. "Stop her!" Anna's heart pounded like a drum, but she moved with purpose, dodging shattered furniture and fallen beams, her footsteps muffled by the damp earth. She reached the boundary of the estate just as the flames surged higher, illuminating her gaunt face streaked with soot. In that moment, she saw Mara's son, his small frame trembling, caught in the chaos. Without hesitation, Anna darted toward him, pulling him close before sprinting into the night. The house's collapse echoed behind her, a deafening thunderclap that seemed to shake the very ground she ran on. She could feel the heat on her back, the acrid smell of smoke filling her nostrils. Yet her mind was clear. This was her revenge, her reckoning. Her voice, hoarse but resolute, cut through the chaos. "I've suffered enough. No more silence, no more pain." As she disappeared into the shadows, her silhouette became one with the darkness, a symbol of rebellion rising from ashes, a testament that even in the face of brutality, the spirit of justice could ignite a fiery storm unstoppable and fierce. Under the shroud of night, Anna's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the fallen debris and smoldering ruins of the house's remnants. Her skin prickled with sweat and soot, yet her mind remained razor-sharp, focused on the flickering silhouette of Mara's trembling child, blue lips trembling with fear. "Hold on," Anna whispered fiercely, clutching the boy's small hand as they dodged collapsing beams and shattered furniture, the glow of the fire casting dancing shadows across their hurried path. The acrid smell of burning wood and charred flesh clung to her nostrils, but she pushed forward, her ears ringing with the distant crackle and the screams that echoed from within. Every step felt heavy, yet driven by a relentless resolve, she knew this was the culmination of her pain. The night she had meticulously plotted for months, her desire for justice burning hotter than the flames behind her. Behind her, the house groaned and finally gave way with a deafening explosion of fire and timber, sending up a towering inferno that painted the sky blood red. Anna's heart pounded, not just from exertion, but from a complex cocktail of rage, sorrow, and a fierce hope for liberation. "We're free now," she murmured, voice trembling with both exhaustion and conviction, clutching Mara's son tightly as she darted toward the shadows, where darkness wrapped her like a shroud. Her silhouette, streaked with soot and tears, melted into the night, a silent testament to the fury of one woman who refused to endure silence anymore. Every step she took away from the burning house was a step toward a future she would forge from the ashes. A future where justice, however fierce, could finally take root beyond the flames of her revenge. The crackling roar of the flames still echoed in Anna's ears as she plunged into the dense darkness beyond the smoldering ruins, her breath ragged and spiced with the scent of charred wood and smoke. Shadows cloaked her silhouette as she hurried through the tangled underbrush, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant screams of the masters trapped inside their collapsing prison. She clutched Mara's boy tightly, his trembling fingers clutching, her torn sleeve eyes wide with horror and awe. "Run, child," she whispered fiercely, voice trembling but resolute. "We've finally broken free, but we must keep moving." The night air was thick with the acrid smell of ash and vengeance, each step heavy with the weight of her act, an explosion of retribution that threatened to consume her own soul. Yet beneath her fatigue, her mind sharpened with purpose. Every scar, every moment of suffering had led to this. She remembered the faces of the masters, greedy, cruel, detached from any shred of humanity, and the brutal images seared into her memory. Her mother's bloodied body, the overseer's sneering face as he beat her for nothing, the helpless tears of her fellow slaves. Anna's eyes flicked to the distant glow of the firestorm behind her, knowing the chaos she ignited would ripple through the estate's silent halls and beyond. Sweat dripped down her brow as she maneuvered through thickets, listening for patrols or shouts, her ears attuned to every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves. The night felt alive, haunted by her past and pulsing with her vengeance's raw energy. She dared a glance back, seeing flames licking skyward, a living symbol of her fury before whispering to herself, "This is for them, for us." Every step she took was a defiant act against the endless cycle of brutality, a silent vow that she wouldn't let her pain hollow her. Instead, she would forge a new dawn from the ruins, no matter how dark the night or how steep the path ahead. Under the cloak of night, Anna moved with a quiet urgency born from years of silent suffering. Her hands trembled slightly as she lit the makeshift fuse she had painstakingly assembled from scraps. Dried moss, old oil, and a twisted piece of metal she had bent into a lever. The house loomed before her, shrouded in shadows, its windows, dark save for the flickering flames that soon began to dance ominously behind the curtains. She whispered a prayer, eyes fixed on the tiny spark igniting the wick, then slipped into the darkness, her breath shallow as she navigated the maze of corridors she had studied for weeks. Every creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet seemed amplified in the silence, her heart pounding like a drum. Inside, the masters reveled in drunken laughter, oblivious to the inferno creeping closer, their voices growing distant and distorted as the fire's heat intensified. Suddenly a scream pierced through the chaos, someone trapped, a life caught in the flames, and Anna's stomach clenched. She hesitated only a moment before rushing toward the sound, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting instincts. Vengeance or mercy, destruction or salvation. Pushing past collapsing beams, she found Mara's young son trapped beneath a fallen chair, his frightened eyes pleading for help. With trembling hands, Anna grasped him, breath hitching as smoke billowed around. Them. "Hold on!" she whispered fiercely, her voice cracked with emotion. As she pulled him free and sprinted back into the smoky night, she cast a final glance at the house, its walls cracking, the roof collapsing in a thunderous roar, knowing this night would mark the beginning of a reckoning that could never be undone. Her resolve hardened. She had ignited not just the house, but the entire foundation of their brutal world. This was her act of defiance, her symphony of fire and fury, a testament to her pain and her hope for a future carved from ashes. Anna's breathing was ragged as she burst through the shattered doorway, flames licking the dark sky like hungry, claws casting flickering shadows over her sweat-slick face. Her heart pounded with a furious, desperate rhythm. Every step she took was driven by the memory of her mother's screams, the cold brutality etched into her bones. She crouched low, voice trembling but fierce. "Hold on, Mara's boy," as she grasped the trembling child's tiny hand, pulling him free from beneath the fallen chair amidst choking smoke and cinders swirling like vengeful spirits. Sparks ignited her resolve anew. This act wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming her dignity from the maw of this house of horrors. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the masters or their twisted laughter, knowing they were probably still inside, drunk on their own cruelty. With her makeshift torch, a rag soaked in oil, her fingers trembling but steady, she sprinted toward the back exit, flames casting a hellish glow over her streaked face. The house groaned and shuddered, timbers splintering as the fire devoured secrets buried deep within its walls, hidden chambers filled with the evidence of atrocities, long buried beneath layers of greed and silence. From behind her, a booming voice echoed, "Stop her, damn it!" But she kept running, lungs burning, heart pounding like a drumbeat of rebellion. As she burst into the open night, the cool air hit her like a baptism. The inferno devoured the house, transforming it into a blazing monument of her rage. She paused only a moment, watching the flames swallow the structure, feeling the heat crawl up her skin, her ears ringing with the crackling fury. Her mind was a storm. Trauma, fury, hope, all woven into a single purpose: to ignite their world's foundations and burn away the chains that had bound her for so long. "Tonight, the dawn breaks," she whispered into the dark, trembling, with a fierce hope that this act of fire would mark not just their destruction, but the birth of a new, freer world. The flames danced wildly into the night sky, casting jagged shadows across the broken remnants of La Casa de la Justicia. Anna's breath hitched as she watched the inferno consume the once imposing structure, its roar echoing like a triumphant cry from her wounded soul. She moved cautiously through the chaos, her heart pounding in a symphony of adrenaline and grief, knowing she had crossed a line that could never be undone. The crackling fire reflected her inner tumult. The pain of her lost childhood, the screams of her mother echoing in her mind, and the slow, burning fury that had festered for years beneath her quiet exterior. As she slipped through the shadows, she caught sight of a figure stumbling out, one of the masters, face scorched, eyes wide with terror. He reached out, voice hoarse, pleading, "Please, what have we done to deserve this?" But Anna's resolve remained steel. She tightened her grip on the torch, her voice steady, yet fierce. "You took everything from us," she whispered coldly. "Tonight, justice burns alongside your house." Her footsteps carried her away from the collapsing walls, past the screams, and chaos, her senses sharpened by the storm of flames. The night air was thick with smoke and the scent of charred wood, yet within her, a fragile seed of hope had taken root, an unyielding belief that her act of vengeance was not merely destruction, but the harbinger of a new dawn. She paused, watching the blaze crackle and flare, flames licking toward the sky like a promise of liberation, before vanishing into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of embers and shattered silence. Every fiber of her being told her she had begun something irreversible, yet her mind whispered that from the ashes, something stronger, something truly free, might someday rise.